This is the Enjoyer Podcast. I'm your host, James Dixon.
These next two episodes, I'm going to take on the two mentalities holding back Republican voters in Michigan. You can either choose to be cynical in 2026 with the ultimate battle for Michigan coming up with governor, secretary of state, attorney general, and now an open U.S. Senate seat with all 148 seats in the legislature, with 13 House seats, U.S. House seats up for grabs. You can choose to be cynical. You can choose to tell me that Republicans just can't win and there's nothing that can be done and the voter rolls are too bloated. You could do that. Or you could choose to work hard. I've never met one single person who does both. Usually the people who are the most cynical are anons, and they're people who don't have skin in the game. That's not going to be good enough. I don't care whether you use your name. I care about whether you put respect on your name by putting effort behind it. So find a role in the 2026 election. Find somebody you like. Find something to do and do that thing. But I've traced the heart of the problem really to two things that I continue to hear from Michigan Republicans. And this week we're going to take on both. One is the 2022 election, and two is the idea that Democrats steal every election. As I will show on the next episode in my next monologue, these are actually the same argument. But let's handle the last argument first. Democrats steal everything. We're just screwed. Look, I get why you think so. The 2020 election was screwy. The 2022 election was the gut punch of all time. The question I always hear from people, from Republicans, is after what Gretchen Whitmer did during lockdowns, how could she possibly have been reelected as governor? Next episode, I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to put 2022 in context, and then you're going to put it to bed. Anytime someone mentions it to you, you're going to send them what I say, and then we're never going to speak of this again. For now, I can tell you this much. If you want to win 2026, you need a mentality shift. You need to commit yourself to win anyway. It might be a riddle, it might be a paradox, but if you think Michigan's election systems are screwy, the fact is you have to win it to fix it. And so 2026, when all those big seats are up for grabs, including Secretary of State, that's the best time to win it. There hasn't been another one since 2018. There won't be another one until 2034. And so basically what I'm saying is Michigan Republicans need to look to Michigan football for their example. How do you win anyway? You do what Jim Harbaugh did. So after a 2-4 season in 2020, Jim Harbaugh was given another chance to redeem himself. Michigan had gotten its ass kicked historically by Ohio State in the two games prior before the COVID-canceled game of 2020. So Ohio State at this point was winning the game and the recruiting battle. Ohio State at that point was winning the game and the recruiting battle. How can you possibly compete? Well, Harbaugh decided to win anyway by playing his brand of football. Tough, physical, relentless. There'd be no more talk of speed and space. Harbaugh would build a tough football team. Rather than try and fail to beat Ohio State at its own game, Michigan would pull the Buckeyes into a phone booth and bludgeon them there. Harbaugh had to form this thesis at the height of Ohio State's success and at Michigan's lowest point. When we say it's darkest before dawn, we're talking about Michigan going into the 2021 season. And so when Harbaugh looked across the field at his rivals, of course he saw a talented team, but not a tough team. Tough was the game Michigan could win. The trade it could hang its hat on. It worked. Not only did Michigan win the game that year, it won a national championship 2 years later. And on the third year, even when Ohio State followed by winning its own national championship, it still wasn't tough enough to beat Michigan. In the last recruiting cycle, Michigan actually pulled a Mr. Football from Ohio, a running back named Jordan Marshall. You might remember him getting 100 yards in his first college game. And so right now, after deciding to win anyway, on the field and in the recruiting game, Michigan can and does beat Ohio State. Because rather than make excuses, Jim Harbaugh committed himself to win anyway. Going into 2026, Michigan Republicans need to make that same choice. Win anyway. My guest today, State Rep Bryan Posthumus, will help us look across the field at the Democrats. When I look at the top of the 2026 ballot, I see Jocelyn Benson. I see someone who looks attractive and looks like they would be a good candidate. They've even won 2 statewide races. But when I look a little bit closer, I see not much native talent. I see an empty skirt suit whose rollout went about as well as the Challenger exploration. Then I look at Mike Duggan, and I see a man who abandoned his wife at Duggan's highest moment in politics, and then his political party at its lowest moment. I look at Duggan, and I see a leaver, not the leader Michigan needs in its governor. When I look at Pete Buttigieg, I see a walking DEI hire whose only claim to fame is his sexuality. I see a man more fit to serve as Notre Dame's next leprechaun than Michigan's next senator. Everywhere I look, I see a Michigan Democrat Party that's going over the edge. Bryan will help us talk through 2 especially bad cases that are happening at the local level. Bryan, welcome back to the Enjoyer Podcast.
Thanks for having me on again. I always appreciate listening to what you have to say.
Absolutely. I appreciate you taking the time to do this on a Monday. I know you guys have a lot to do these next 3 days in session. Bryan, we're at the start of the second Trump era. This seems to me a bad time for cities, for communities to be embracing sanctuary city status. And yet in Grand Rapids, Mayor David LeGrand, a former lawmaker, wants to do just that. It took a letter from the House Speaker, Matt Hall, to get Kalamazoo Township to stop its plans to make that mistake. He made it clear that state funds would be compromised if they did. And so Kalamazoo Township didn't do it. Grand Rapids didn't do it. What is LeGrand's angle here, from what you can tell?
I mean, look, he also came out and said that he didn't want to use the term sanctuary cities for what he's doing because he didn't want to mislead anybody. You know, terms and semantics are irrelevant here. We need our local law enforcement to ensure that they are actually working with ICE and working with the federal government to ensure that our communities are safe. And the decisions that the city of Grand Rapids are taking are going to be making our city less safe, unfortunately.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, no one really. How is that his choice to even make? You know what I'm saying? Like, they couldn't even get a resolution passed because people don't like the idea. Why is David LeGrand sticking his neck out? Is there a thing behind the thing here? Is he setting himself up as some kind of martyr to run for something else?
You know, I don't know. I've known Mayor LeGrand for a while, and
Yeah.
you know, when he has an idea in his head, he's gonna run with it. That's what he does. And you know, one thing I will give him credit for, and one thing I will say about him is he does the things that he genuinely believes is the right thing to do. For him, it's not a political means to an end. It's what he genuinely believes is the right thing to do. Unfortunately, he's just wrong in this scenario. We need to be making our communities more safe.
Now, when Speaker Hall saw Kalamazoo Township about to go down this road, he wrote a sternly worded letter, and people hate those letters, but they actually matter. People hate the letters because they don't read them. What he said was basically, if you guys do this, you're compromising our ability to fund you, because you might get us crossways with our funders, the federal government. We just can't have you doing that kind of thing. Could something like that happen to Grand Rapids if they go down this road?
You know, it depends on what direction they end up, or where they end up with it, right? Like, right now it's talk. Right now it's it was the mayor, you know, talking at a press conference or whatever. And you know, it just depends on what direction they actually take.
Yeah. Help us understand this, Bryan, because in my mind's eye, I've been to Grand Rapids probably 3 times in my life. Always liked it. Beautiful city. But when I picture Grand Rapids, I picture clogs, or maybe that's more Holland. I see Christians. I think Zondervan Publishing. I think about the home of Gerald Ford. How does Grand Rapids go from that, a solidly conservative town, to the leftist enclave it has become? What happened?
Well, the city itself hasn't necessarily been a far right conservative city as far as the population demographics have been.
Hmm.
It's more the surrounding and metropolitan areas of the city that have been the conservative stalwarts of the county.
Okay.
Now that being said, in the city there has been a trend to the left, and especially among its elected officials, and I mean you can see that march going into Mayor LeGrand, right? He's definitely much further left than previous mayors the city of Grand Rapids has had, and you can see that in the policies that are coming out.
Yeah. And it was so fascinating to me. And this is what the media does a really poor job of explaining what people are looking at. So everyone wanted to get the big headline about Grand Rapids and Sanctuary. If you can get those in there, that's a nice SEO headline. It's controversial, especially if you can get Trump too. Oh man,
Right.
that's great controversy. But then when you read what LeGrand actually said, he basically admits there's nothing a city can do. He
Right.
said at that same meeting where he's talking about wanting to do this, he said the question for this commission is what can we do to honor, respect, and support members of our community? Reading between the lines, that's not exactly the resistance. Is there a disconnect between what we were told might happen in Grand Rapids and what they actually wanted to do? Or were they
I,
actually going to do this thing?
I think there's a disconnect between what was said, what they can do, and what they actually intended to do. I think that
Right,
is
right,
disconnected.
right.
And a lot of it is disconnected because of rhetoric, right? Far left rhetoric, and actually, I mean, there's rhetoric on the right that leads to a disconnect between what can be done and what people are saying they're going to do. And so when
Right.
it comes down to it, everybody on all sides of the aisle needs to dial back the rhetoric and start just speaking plainly to the population, saying, "Look, this is what needs to be done. This is how we can do it. And these are the steps that we can take in order to achieve that." So that's where the disconnect, I think, is coming out.
And then when I read LeGrand's language, it seems to me that Democrats have largely given up on the idea of the resistance. And they've decided that their better tool, rather than, you know, pink hats in the streets and that kind of thing, Black Lives Matter, raised fists, it seems like they're almost trying to flood the zone with empathy and present people who don't want illegals in America as the bad guys and themselves as the empathetic good guys. Do you think it'll
You're,
work?
you're 100% right. That is the track that they're going. We'll see if it works in the long run. They might. I think they're going to have better results in the short term than they
Mm,
had been having the last 2 years with what they were doing with the resistance and the pink hats and all of that. You know, that had its day for the Democrats. That
oh yeah.
they made hay with that for 4 years or whatever that
Hmm.
was, and then people just got tired of it. People saw through it and realized they were just being taken for a ride, and so the Democrats they give for all of the bad about the Democrats. You can't say that they aren't politically savvy. So they saw what the
Mm.
problem was, and they've pivoted a little bit.
Recently, in a column, I took the Michigan media to task. It's
Oh,
my
good.
thesis that they are acting as Jocelyn Benson's running mate in the 2026 campaign. But I actually believe that it was under Whitmer that this strange arrangement first took place, and I see really two events that solidified this dynamic. One was COVID, and the media adopted the "we're all in this together" mentality, and they stopped covering the governor and started covering for the governor. And then so you had COVID, but then you also had the back to back, that woman from Michigan, and then the kidnapping. And so I think it became a game of protect the queen rather than cover the queen and talk about what she's doing to her subjects. And so when Whitmer was the hot ticket, headlines, storylines were regularly written in her voice. As the opposition party who doesn't get those uh those balls to bounce in your favor ever when the media deals with you. Tell me about what that's like to constantly read the opposition treated as the normal people and you guys as like the ones trying to bugger the arrangement.
It's it's hilarious and it hilariously frustrating. I should say. I mean, look, as a Republican and as a conservative, I've known my entire life that the media has had a leftward bend to it, but over the last, I don't know, 6 to 8 years, it's just gotten out of hand. And I mean, think about think about
Right.
when the media tried to portray Vance as the weird one in comparison to the Democrat vice president nominee,
How
right?
could
Like,
that have
if,
happened?
if you're trying to talk about a weird scale, Walz is definitely much higher on the weird scale than JD Vance, who's probably, to me, one of the most down to earth federal top level politicians that I've ever seen. And so it's just comical. And but to your point, the Democrats started their playbook pretty heavily in Michigan. Or, I'm sorry, not the Democrats, the media. I mean, it's one and the same, I guess. But
Yeah.
the media started their playbook going heavily into favor with Gretchen Whitmer back when she first started running for governor, and they are very clearly pivoting to Jocelyn Benson this time. I mean, think about it from
Right.
this, like she had a press conference on the day of announcing her candidacy from a state-owned building. That would be like me announcing candidacy from the floor of the House of Representatives. Do you
It's
think the
just not
media
a
would have
done
given me a
thing.
pass? Right.
It's not a done thing. I remember when Trump did an event in Livingston County at the sheriff's office. It wasn't even like it was like in the main office. It wasn't like it was at the jail. It was in some kind of, storage building, basically. Big empty space at the Livingston County Sheriff's Office. They acted like that was bloody murder. And they
Right.
took the campaign finance complaints. Every complaint was treated as if it was absolutely true, as if there was no other way to view it. And then Jocelyn Benson does the very same thing at an office she controls. Trump got permission to come in, and we can't know that anyone else who asked would have been denied it.
Right.
Jocelyn Benson used a facility that she controls directly to do her press conference and got a pass. What did you think when you saw how that was covered?
So I thought, oh, this is par for the course. It as frustrating as that is, we've had to come to accept that, and
Yeah,
come to accept it is the wrong word. Come to expect it is probably the way
that's
I should
exactly
say
it.
that. And interestingly enough, with that too, if a Republican had bundled and bungled their announcement as much as Jocelyn Benson did for governor, they would have been ridiculed for weeks. There would have been every story in the state of Michigan would have been about how much they messed up this announcement. That was the worst rollout of a gubernatorial campaign that I have ever seen, by far, not even close. And yeah, the media covered it a little bit, but
A little bit.
at the very minimal amount that they possibly could have to just let it slide. It boggles my mind.
I'm gonna have to send you this column because I light them up. I mean, from the Detroit News, not ever mentioning the Chinese voter. So
Right.
you let this lady get off all these uncontested quotes about efficiency and transparency, and you don't mention the biggest bungle she ever had, which was in the last election. It wasn't 3 election cycles ago. It was 3 months ago. It's a big deal, and I've never heard what the plan is to stop it. We're actually gonna have that story later this week, an element of it. But the media was so busy stage managing the rollout that they couldn't very well then comment on it.
Right.
They were complicit in it, and it's just, tell me people see this. I live and breathe. Tell me you see it. Tell me people like your colleagues, they have to see what the media is doing, and that they will not get a fair shot from both parties.
Oh, my colleagues absolutely see it, and so do so does pretty much everybody that's involved in politics. And the good news is, it seems to me that the average American and the average Michigander is waking up to that, and they're starting to realize it too.
Right.
And so that's good. And then at the same time, it actually provides an opportunity for people like you, right? I'm spending a lot more time trying to talk with people like you and Justin Barclay now than I do try to talk to the Detroit News or some of the more legacy media types, because I know I'm not going to get a fair shake at any of the conversations that we have.
Speaker Hall talked about that. He did a conference call with the conservative and independent media in Michigan and talked about that. Like, you can give someone 40 minutes of your time. People have stuff to do. People have families. Like, not everyone lives their life hoping to talk to some reporter and explain things to them.
Right.
And then you barely get your side presented in a story that takes on the governor's voice or the opposition's voice. Like, it is not journalism. And that's what I'm trying to get my neighbors to understand. This isn't journalism that you happen to disagree with. It's not even bad journalism. It's bad comms. It's bad advocacy. I think Whitmer has to be embarrassed by some of the stuff they print. And Benson? I mean, when you see that column and you see this guy, Jason Colthorpe from Detroit TV, just fumble over his words and basically trying to ask, you don't like the guy in the White House, why do you want to run for governor? And her to sit up there, like, oh my God, I never imagined someone would ask that question.
Right.
It's embarrassing to watch. And I worry, Bryan, because sometimes people might think that it's like a personal thing.
Right.
I don't have anything against these people. I don't know these people. I don't care about these people. I live in Michigan and I want to read true and timely stories.
Absolutely.
That's my bias.
Well, and at some point, at some point, there's got to be a campaign violation, right? Because of all of the free campaign publicity the Democrats are getting from the media, that they're not going to give to anybody that's relatively conservative. And so, how does that work from campaign finance standpoint?
Eric Nesbitt is not going to get the mood lighting treatment if he gets an interview with Channel 4 in Detroit at all.
Right.
Bryan, the Overton window has moved quite a bit right on immigration. Even in Metro Detroit, neither Detroit City or Wayne County, which are as deep blue as it gets, nobody wants the sanctuary label. It's a hot potato. No one wants the heat that comes with it. What does it mean? What should people understand it to mean? That the left in 2025 is walking away from these labels rather than saying it with their chest and embracing them.
Well, I think we have to be careful of the silver-tongued devil here, right? Like they may not be using the same rhetoric, but they still mean the same things. And so they're just trying to cover it up with a shinier object. Like I look at Pete Buttigieg, for example, and this is kind of going off topic a little bit, but Pete Buttigieg is one of the most liberal political figures in the history of our country.
Right.
And yet the way he communicates and articulates his message, he makes it sound like it's modern, and it's impressive to watch.
Obama did the same thing.
Absolutely. So we have to be really careful. Just because they're not using the same rhetoric doesn't mean they don't fundamentally believe the same far left, progressive, California style policies that they always have espoused. They still push that. They're still going to push that, and they're going to into the future. Just going to be under a different one.
Which is to say, they are not in retreat. It's a strategic retreat.
Yeah,
it's a tactical retreat. And so they're like affirmative action, right? Almost 20 years ago in 2006, Michigan voters said no more. We're tired of talking about this stuff. We're tired of lawsuits. Tired of my boys not getting into Michigan. No more affirmative action in the state of Michigan. What do? Now they call it DEI. And now you have to whack a different mole. It's the same mole. There's nothing different about it.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that is a good piece of guidance, which is take note. When the left is acting strong and saying it with their chest, that means they're going to just steamroll you.
Right.
That's what the early Biden years were like. Like, we're going to do it and you can't stop us. But when they're making these strategic retreats, it's only the rhetoric that changes. They've never given up on any of their goals.
Right. Absolutely. Well, you say that, and that brings up a really good point. One of the things that Republicans really need to learn is something that the Democrats are good at. The progressive movement started back in 1913, right? Over 100 years ago. And they made the decision, all right, these are the goals that we want to accomplish. And we're going to take little bites at the apple over the next 100 years, over the next 150 years. And we are going to systematically move these policies through. We're going to systematically move our country further and further left, slowly but surely. And they succeeded. Whereas Republicans, on the other hand, the challenge that we have is we say, all right, that is the wrong path. We need to be way over here. We need to be all the way over here. And if we don't get all the way over there in one bite at the apple,
Right.
then we say, all right, well, I'm not willing to take it halfway there, and then but still working toward that bigger goal.
That's exactly it. I just, had Ryan Kelly on recently, as he explores a run for governor. And basically in my monologue before that one, I'm saying, don't make Trump the enemy of the good.
Right.
So many people love Donald Trump so much, and I get it. The man who gets shot in the head is typically the one telling the truth. But don't make Trump the enemy of the good people who are trying to save our state and live in our state, who just aren't billionaires. And they haven't been famous for 40, 50 years, but they do care about you.
Mm-hmm.
So 2026, ultimate battle for Michigan. I sense, especially on Twitter, a discontent with Michigan Republicans. Every time you hear an old name or a retread, I think Mike Cox could actually do really well in the governor's race. But some people who view everything through a 2016 Trump lens just don't know where he lands on that scale, because his entire time in politics predated that. And so what I see is a discontent with what's happening, and even some new names and new faces. They're looking a little froggy. They're looking a little restless, like they want to get involved. What would you tell someone who's considering whether they should make that leap into politics, for good or for bad?
From the standpoint of running, or for the standpoint
Running.
of getting involved? This is what I would say. Number one, as a party, we need to make sure that we nominate the most conservative person that we can, that can get elected,
Who
that
can win. Yep.
The way that I always view the most conservative person is the most conservative person that can actually accomplish what they're trying to accomplish.
Right.
Because if somebody's 10 times more conservative, but they can't accomplish anything,
doesn't matter.
Did they move the needle? And so where my barometric meter is who is willing and able and wants to move the needle, and who can do it, who can succeed in that. And excuse me. And so we need to look at it from that perspective. So that's the first thing. And so what I would say for anybody that's looking at getting into one of these races, whether it's governor or U.S. Senate or, Secretary of State, AG, whatever it is, even state house, or even local school board, from top to bottom, you have to look at what are the fundamental principles that I believe in, and what can I do in order to succeed in that? And then also we need to look at, am I willing to do the work? Am I willing to actually step up and do the work? Because as you started the segment out, we have to come to the conclusion that we just need to make the decision and win anyway. And the media is against us. We need to win anyway.
Win anyway.
Win anyway.
No one's cheering for you.
Absolutely.
You have to win, and you have to figure it out.
Yes. And the way that you win anyway is work harder than everybody else out there. There's a reason why my office did over 100,000 doors in the last election cycle to help win back the House of Representatives. We had to outwork everybody, and that's what it takes to win. And so you have to be willing to do the work.
Yeah. Bryan, in 2026, you're going to share the ballot with someone who's running for governor. What kind of candidate would help you? You're lower down on the ticket there at the very top. What kind of person at the top would be an asset to you?
So Republicans need, I'm going to take this a nonpartisan standpoint.
All right.
A candidate for governor, when we're talking about a governor, somebody leading the state of Michigan, we need somebody that can effectively cast a vision for the state of Michigan. That can say, this is where we're going as a state. This is how we're going to get there. And I'm the one to take you there.
Right.
Too often we have candidates for governor that don't have the capacity for leadership. They have political ambition, or they have millions of dollars in the bank, any of the above. What they don't have is a capacity for leadership, the capacity to cast a vision, get people to buy into that vision, and just step up and lead.
Yeah. Interesting. So we'll get you out of here on this one, Bryan. 2026. I harp on it. I want people to be sick of it and say, James, I voted, man. Stop talking about it. I already cast my vote. I want people to cast their vote on the first day possible so they can tell me to stop talking about it.
Absolutely.
Everyone has high hopes about what could happen. Everything's wide open. It could be a historic win. Michigan could be a very different state this time 2 years from now in 2027. Who, whether it's a candidate, whether it's a mentality on the Democrat side, maybe they're out for revenge, maybe it's a mentality on the Republican side, they think everything's stolen. Who or what is the biggest threat to a Republican win in 2026?
Republicans themselves. As I genuinely believe that the biggest hindrance to Republicans winning is Republicans ourselves. For too often, I go to county party meetings. I go to different events around the state, and I find Republicans fighting with Republicans rather than Republicans fighting with Democrats.
Yes.
Yes. A couple years ago, I can't even remember which convention this was at, but this was several years ago. I was at a county convention, and it was candidates for Secretary of State, and there were like 4 people. Actually, it was during that time, so there were a lot of different candidates for a lot of different offices. Every single candidate was talking about other Republicans and fighting other Republicans. And one candidate got up there, and the only thing that candidate talked about was how they were going to fight the Democrats and fight the leftward lurch. There was like 10 people that spoke. Only one of them talked about fighting the Democrats. That person, I wasn't going to vote for. I voted for them.
Why is that?
Anytime you have an organization that has we need to be, and we are, a big tent. So when you have a big tent, that means there are varying degrees of philosophy on a range of different issues, on a range of different topics. And so when you have that, there's going to be disagreements there, and we can fight that out amongst each other. We can have that conversation, but ultimately we have to realize we're on the same team. And when we're on the same team, the opposite team isn't another section of our team. It's not, the opposite team isn't the defense to our offense. The opposite team is the people wearing the other jersey.
Right. Absolutely. They say home is where you're treated the best, but complain the most.
Right.
And so I think about, like on that show I used to love, The Good Wife. This guy feels like he's screwed over by the system. Who does he kill? His attorney, because as far as he knows, his attorney represents the entire system. And so I think that's what happens is when I read Mallory McMorrow and I see her stuff, it seems like it's the same for the Democrats. You're getting heat from your own people because you're their entryway into politics. So to express that discontent to you is essentially expressing your distaste for the entire system. And in a way, it's good they're coming to you because at least they trust you enough to do that. So what can Republicans do to have that thick skin and understand that a lot of these criticisms are coming from a good place and actually objections are opportunities?
Absolutely. So I'm glad that you said that. And what I try to do is very clearly articulate and communicate what my core beliefs are. It's if the people that know what I fundamentally believe, they know that my goal is to move our state to the right. They know that. And so if there's a small policy issue that we may disagree on, or I take a vote that they may disagree on, that one vote, even though I agree with them 98% of the time, they're going to give me some leniency on that one vote because they know where I'm trying to go. They trust that that I am actively going in that direction. And so it's like, okay, we have a disagreement on this one issue. Maybe there was a bigger strategy at play there. Maybe there was a different reason. Maybe there's a side of it that I actually don't understand. What have you. It allows for grace and communication. But we need to look at the term, I think it was Socrates that used the term, come, let us reason together. And that's how we should resolve our differences, not by shouting each other and calling each other names and going hunting and all that stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Bryan, where can people learn more about yourself and your constitutional amendment? And throw in a little update on that if you could.
Quick update on the constitutional amendment. It has been introduced, the amendment to require proof of citizenship when registering to vote and photo ID when casting your ballot. That has been introduced. It is now officially HJRB, House Joint Resolution B. My hope is that sometime at the end of February or beginning of March, it'll be taken up in committee, passed out of committee, and go to the House floor. That being said, in order to get that passed, we need to get 2/3 vote in the House, 2/3 vote in the Senate, which means we need a lot of Democrats to get on board as well.
Right.
It is my hope that they will, but I don't expect that. So we are also starting the gearing up phase of a citizen-led initiative in the event that that we don't get it through the legislature. And as that takes fold, I will be reaching out to you to have you help me get volunteers to collect signatures, because it's going to be a big lift.
Oh, it's going to be huge. It's going to be huge, but it's going to be something that if you're one of these people who tweets constantly, and I get it. I get having an election integrity concern. We just had a guy from China vote. I most certainly do get it. But what I'm saying is you got to win first. Michigan had to beat Ohio State on the field first to win recruiting battles. You can't just say we need to win the recruiting battles and then we'll figure out how to beat them on the field. No one's going to come to you when you're losing. Right. So until winning you break that dynamic, winning begets winning. And losing begets whining and backbiting and finger pointing. And we just can't afford any of that anymore. It is time. And so I'm going to talk about what happened in 2022. That it was not a Gretchen Whitmer win. That when all your candidates are taken off the ballot and you're left with the C team, there was no 2022 election. It never happened. Move on from it. Take the loss. But don't let one bad day 3-4 years ago be your excuse to lose the state.
Preach.
I hope people get it. I hope people get it because, cynicism is a good way to wind up. I don't want to have to move to Kentucky in a few years. Beautiful state. It's probably the first one that comes to mind.
I like visiting there.
But I don't want to go. I want to stay here, and I can if we win. So, Bryan, thank you so much. Where can people find you on social media?
People can find me on Facebook at reposthumus.com or reposthumus on Facebook. Same thing with X and also Instagram. I'm on all three social media platforms. I have official pages that I have to do my updates on, and I keep separate from the political side. And then I have the political campaign, more campaign oriented side. So check me out there, and you can keep up to date there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bryan.
Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it. Always a pleasure to be on.